Pilate, a loner tomb, and taking care of your mama. Today on another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today we are going through the book of Luke chapter 23 and also John chapter 18 and 19. Now tomorrow we're going to jump into Matthew 28 and Mark 16 as we continue through the Bible in 1 year chronologically. So let's dive in and see what we get today. There's that Pilate I was telling you about. Of course, he don't have no airplane with him or nothing, but here we are. Now, Pontius Pilate here, his normal residence was in Caesarea Maritima, but he came to Jerusalem during the Jewish festivals to keep an eye on things. Now, since Jesus was crucified along with two criminals, a punishment that only the Romans could render, it seems that it's possible that a couple of executions were already scheduled before Jesus' sentencing happened, and all this happened so quickly together. Thus, Pilate had probably come to town planning to do some executions of criminals, but he left town having executed an innocent one. Now, the three charges that the Jews brought against Jesus in Pilate's presence were complete fabrications. I'm speaking in Luke chapter 23 now, and I'm going through verses 2 through 4 when I'm talking about this part. It was true that the huge crowds had flocked to hear Jesus speak, but his teachings were not aimed at misleading Israel. The claims that he was opposing payments of taxes to Caesar was an outright lie as well, because wasn't he the one that said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's, right? So Jesus was the Messiah here, but he carefully avoided giving the impression that he meant to topple Rome or ascend the throne as king here on earth as of Israel. And Pilate here had undoubtedly heard about Jesus, and he saw right through the Sanhedrin's rush to judgment on Jesus. Now, when Pilate heard that Jesus was from Galilee, he saw a convenient way to excuse himself from the Sanhedrin's headhunt here, when we're in verses 5 through 7 in Luke 23. He turned Jesus over to the proper jurisdiction, which was that of Herod Antipas, the ruler over Galilee. Now, like Pilate, Herod was in Jerusalem for the festival as well, and that was the festival of Passover and unleavened bread. We get to verses 8 through 11, and at an earlier time, Herod Antipas had been anxious to meet Jesus, that we read about in chapter 9. And the Pharisees had claimed that Herod wanted to kill Jesus. So Jesus' sentence before Herod may have been designed to fulfill the prophecy that's in Isaiah 53, verses 7 through 8. In spite of the serious accusations of the Sanhedrin, even Herod Antipas simply made sport of Jesus and sent him back to Pilate for final legal disposition. He dressed Jesus in bright clothing in order to ridicule him as a fake king and to irritate the Sanhedrin as well, since they charged him with claiming to be a king as well. We get to verses 12 through 15 here, and Herod Antipas and Pontius Pilate kind of became friends here because they both made the same assessment that no grounds to charge this man are there. So apparently they also shared the same low opinion of the Jewish Sanhedrin for pursuing a death sentence against Jesus, who they found had done nothing wrong. Now, we move on to the next part here, and we get over to the death of Jesus. And verse 46 sticks out to me. And it says, and Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit. Saying this, he breathed his last. Now, while expressing faith in God by reciting Psalm 31, verse 5 here, Jesus then breathed his last breath. Now, Matthew chapter 27, verse 50, and also John 19, verse 30, refer to this entrusting my spirit. Into your hands I entrust my spirit, or my spirit is given over to you. And I just found that to be very interesting. Jesus was placed on the cross at about 9 a.m. as well here, and he died only after about 6 hours. Now, that's a really unusually short time period for someone that is being crucified to die, because crucifixion victims at this time, they sometimes lingered on for 2 or 3 days before they would finally pass away. But you have to keep in mind everything that Jesus had gone through, all the beatings that his body had taken, and of course dragging that cross up there and then having to have somebody else carry it for him because he was so weakened that he couldn't carry it any further. He had to have help even carrying the cross just to get to the site of the crucifixion. So he was already in a super bad shape. So that's probably why he did not last as long as you might expect. Now we get to verse 50 through 56, and this is about the burial of Jesus. And there's this super cool guy, Joseph of Arimathea. Now, even though Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin, and those were the bad guys, so to speak, he disagreed with their decision to execute Jesus. And he was actually a good and righteous man, but he was also a secret disciple of Jesus as well, as we read in John 19, verse 38. Now, Jesus was laid in the tomb of this wealthy Joseph instead of the shallow common grave reserved for criminals. This fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah 53, verse 9. Now, Matthew chapter 27, verse 65 through 66 stated that soldiers were assigned to guard Jesus' tomb, and that the stone rolled in front of the tomb was stamped with the Roman seal of authority. Now, I just find it interesting that this is a borrowed tomb. This dude had just finished making a brand new tomb for himself, and he's like, I guess it's Jesus guy. He totally believed in Jesus. He believed he was going to resurrect him from the dead. So why not give this guy his tomb, right? Because he's only going to be there 3 days anyway, and then you can use it later. Anyway, I just found that to be pretty interesting. So we're going to move on to the book of John. Now, John chapter 18 and 19 is John's passion narrative, and it appears in these two chapters together. The familiar sequence of events includes Jesus' betrayal by Judas, his informal hearing before Annas, Peter's denial, Jesus' Roman trial before Pilate, and his crucifixion and burial. Now, only John among all the Gospels features Jesus' appearance before Annas, and his Roman trial is covered in more detail in John. On the other hand, John did not provide an account of Jesus' formal Jewish trial before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. So, one point that I want to point out here in the book of John is in chapter 19, and it's verses 25 through 27. And this is where Jesus is making provisions for his mother. So, standing by the cross here, standing by the cross of Jesus, where his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple that he loved standing there, we're going to find out later on, is actually John, who is the author of the book of John, the Apostle John. Standing there, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to the disciple, which was John, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. Now, how big is that? In keeping with biblical injunctions to honor one's parents, as we read in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, and in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16, Jesus made provisions for his mother from the cross, who was almost certainly at this time a widow, and she was probably in her early 50s, and she probably had little to no personal income coming in on her own at this point in her life. So, as an example of Jesus, I certainly hope that I'm able to take care of my mother as long as she lives, or at least as long as I live, if my life comes to an end before hers. And I hope that me and my wife are setting a good example for our children as we try our best to take care of both of our mothers. So, I hope this has helped you in your studies. If it has, click that like button and subscribe button. and click that little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video. And if you're rumbling with me on Rumble, hit that little boxing glove. And I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.